بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم حميم تنزيل الكتاب من الله العزيز العليم غافر الذنب وقابل التوب شديد العقاب ذي الطول لا إله إلا هو إليه المصير.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with Surah Ghafir, and we have few verses left, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless our life with the book of Allah and to make us among the people of the Quran. Ayah number 79 inshallah. We'll take just these three verses. We'll have a short talk, inshallah. Just three verses, inshallah. 79, I'll recite the three verses, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. الله الذي جعل لكم الأنعام لتركبوا منها ومنها تأكلون ولكم فيها منافع ولتبلغوا عليها حاجة في صدوركم وعليها وعلى الفلك تحملون ويريكم آياته فأي آيات الله تنكرون. First ayah, الله الذي جعل لكم الأنعام لتركبوا منها ومنها تأكلون. Another verses that talks about the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But hereafter, what's the previous verses of what talked about the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is above us and underneath us, and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned about the creation of the human beings, and they're going from one stage to the other. Now it's the minna of Allah, the favor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon them with regards to some of the things that is provisions for them. The cattle, which is al-an'am. Al-an'am, as we know, they are the camels, the goats and sheep and cows. These are the cattle. This is al-an'am. So here, Allahu alladhi ja'ala lakum al-an'ama litarkabu minha wa minha ta'kulun. That He subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the translation says, it is Allah who made for you the grazing animals upon which you ride, and some of them you eat. So here يمتن الله يمتن تعالى على عباده. الامتنان is to show His favor and His favors upon them. على عباده, upon His slaves, بما جعل لهم من الأنعام التي بها جملة من الإنعام, that He provided for them, made for them al-an'am, which is the cattle. التي بها جملة من الإنعام, that has in it جملة, much of al-in'am with a kasra, with a hamza in the bottom here, different than al-an'am. Al-in'am is from the ni'am, from the favors of Allah, that He bestowed upon them these favors. So differentiate between al-an'am wal-in'am. بما جعل لهم من الأنعام التي بها جملة من الإنعام. Some or many of the in'am or the favors of Allah. منها, some of these favors, منافع الركوب عليها والحمل, the benefits of riding on it and carrying on it their belongings and their means, as it's also mentioned in Surah Al-Nahl. ومنها منافع الأكل من لحومها, so لتركبوا منها ومنها تأكلون, and eating from its meat, والشرب من ألبانها, and to drink from its milk. ومنها منافع الدفء, ومنها منافع الدفء, the benefit of being warm, taking clothes from it. واتخاذ الآلات, to take tools and means, using its bones or hair or whatever. والأمتعة, and the matters of belonging, things that people would use من أصوافها وأوبارها وأشعارها, as it's mentioned in Surah An-Nahl, from the wool and the الأوبار والأشعار, the hair and so on. إلى غير ذلك من المنافع, and many of these great benefits. This is all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah الذي جعل لكم. He's the one that made that for you. Human beings, they didn't make this. It's all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لكم فيها منافع. This is now what he mentioned. ولكم فيها منافع. You have منافع, many benefits from it. ولتبلغوا عليها حاجة في صدوركم. ولتبلغوا عليها حاجة في صدوركم, which as the second ayah, the translation of it, and he shows you his signs. So, نعم, no, previous one. And for therein are other benefits, and that you may realize upon them a need, which is in your breasts, and upon them, and upon ships you are carried. So, وَلَكُمْ فِيهَا مَنَافِعْ. So, this is part of the manafi', the benefits, and more than what is just mentioned here. And manafi' is the plural of manfa'a. Al-manfa'a from an-naf'. An-naf' is the something, is the subject or the matter that you benefit from it. And an-naf' is when something is used to rectify or to fix a situation or for any means of benefit whatsoever. So that's why the al-intifa' or the benefits are so many different things to be used for benefit from these animals. وَلِتَبْلُغُوا عَلَيْهَا حَاجَةً فِي صُدُورِكُمْ. And also one of these benefits, وَلِتَبْلُغُوا, al-bulugh is to reach a destination. عليها, on it, حاجة, a need, في صدوركم, in your hearts. And the sadr is the breast, which is the place where the heart is. So أي من الوصول إلى الأقطار البعيدة. What does that mean? Like reaching far countries and far places. وحصول السرور بها والفرح عند أهلها, and where a person would be happy and rejoicing, and when he reaches destination. And this is, that's why this is what it says, وَلِتَبْلُغُوا عَلَيْهَ حَاجَةً فِي صُدُورِكُمْ. Something that you need, and every person has their own needs when it comes to traveling. Just when you look at people when they're traveling, one of the things is to contemplate, to reflect over what every person's objective from traveling. Everyone has their own thing in their hearts. Someone is, they might even all go to the same destination. They're going to the same city. But each one has their own reason why they're traveling. And not just the reason for traveling, but some of them are traveling because of a sad circumstances. Some of them is for a happy occasion. Some of them because of the love of money, the love of wealth, to spread khair, to spread good, to give da'wah to Allah. All kinds of things that it's all in their hearts. So all of that is by using these means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created for them to reach different destinations. So, and also that وَلِتَبْلُغُوا عَلَيْهِ حَاجَةً فِي صُدُورِكُمْ, and with whatever mean they have. And that's why there's the traveling with regards to the cattle here are mentioned, and وَعَلَيْهَا وَعَلَى الْفُلْكِ تُحْمَلُونَ, وَعَلَيْهَا, and on it, the cattle, وَعَلَى الْفُلْكِ, and on the ships, تُحْمَلُون, you're carried on it. أي على الرواحل البرية والفلك البحرية يحملكم الله, which means on the الرواحل جمع راحلة is the traveling equipment or tool, whether it's on the land or in the sea. البحرية يحملكم الله, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala carries you. الذي سخرها, the one that made it under your power for your use. وهيأ لها ما هيأ من الأسباب, and he made the means to be in such a way so that people are able to travel. التي لا تتم إلا بها, that it can never be completed except by this. And there's something to reflect upon also when he mentioned here as-safar, or traveling with camels and traveling with ships. Because the camels are really, as they call it, safinatul bar. The camels, they call it the ships of the land. They used to call it like this. Why? Because, it's like as if it's sailing on the land. Does not need too much maintenance when it comes to drink and things like this. It has its food, it has its drink. It can stay for a long time without being provided for, and this is all by the creation of Allah. And it's mentioned in the Quran more than one time, and that's why people, all of the animals, all of the creation of Allah requires for the person to reflect upon. But the camels in itself, it's such an amazing creation of Allah. And the more you study the affairs of the camels, it's amazing. Even with the way they interact and the way they do things. And one of the things is they don't forget, for example, if someone harms them, they don't forget the one that would harm them, even after years, and they would revenge. So there are many strange things for them, and this is from the ayat of Allah. But the point here is what is mentioned here is how that it travels for far distance without having to carry so much of the provisions for it. And it's all by the decree and the qadar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the creation of Allah. And also the ships that sail, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created for the human beings the ability to fix or to manufacture some of this also, which is another thing. The camels, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created it from nothing. And the ships, the human beings, they make it, they assemble it together. And it's also from the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon them. The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the ability to the human beings to manufacture something like this, the same thing can be applied to cars, to airplanes, and so on, not to attribute it fully to the human beings. As the ayah here says, وَعَلَى الْفُلْكِ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned al-fulk, or the ships, as a favor from Allah. So the same thing, planes are favors of Allah, cars are favors of Allah, and so on. And the human beings, they use the means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did create the ship, the fulk, or did not create the waters and the oceans and creating in it the laws that governs it, the ships would never be able to sail on it. The same thing with the air and the laws that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, the airplanes would never fly. And the same thing for the cars and the fuel for it and things like this. So it's all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it's in its initial form or the means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created for these means of traveling that human beings can use. So this is وَلِتَبْلُغُوا عَلَيْهَا حَاجَةً فِي صُدُورِكُمْ وَعَلَيْهَا وَعَلَى الْفُلْكِ تُحْمَلُونَ, and on it and on the fulk, تُحْمَلُونَ, you are carried on it. And also تُحْمَلُونَ, in the passive tense, you have the favor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon you, that you are carried on it, that you have the ability to be carried on it and to go from one place, to move from one place to the other. Then وَيُرِيكُمْ آيَاتِهِ فَأَيَّ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ تُنْكِرُونَ, and He subhanahu wa ta'ala يُرِيكُمْ آيَاتِهِ, and He shows you His signs. So which of the signs of Allah do you deny? So this is part of the signs. وَيُرِيكُمْ آيَاتِهِ, He makes you see. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make you see His signs. What is the signs? As I said, al-ayah is a sign to something. So all of these things, the camels, the ships, the air, the oceans, what's mentioned before, the night and the day and so on, these are signs of Allah. They are created as a sign. When you see a sign, then it takes you to what's the sign is for. Right? And this is the forgetfulness of the human beings. They have the means to understand what a sign is. You have a sign on the side of the road, a stop sign, or a sign that says there is this how many miles for the city, or this or that. These are signs. It's not there to for no reason. It has a function to it and a purpose for it. So it's a sign for something. So all of these creations that are signs of something. And the real foolishness of the human beings is when they limit themselves and they don't think of the signs of Allah. You would find them traveling and flying and manufacturing and seeing these animals, but it's of no effect whatsoever to the hearts, when it's supposed to be a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why there are many verses in the Quran to remind us of these signs that we see daily. وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ, and in your own selves, don't you see? We in ourselves are signs. We are a sign for us to reflect upon, so that it leads us to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So this is how the meaning of an ayah, a sign from Allah, الدالة على وحدانيته, that gives the evidence that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one worthy of worship, because He's the one that created all of this, وأسمائه وصفاته, and His names and attributes. وهذا من أكبر نعمه, this is from the greatest of His favors, حيث أشهد عباده آياته النفسية وآياته الأفقية ونعمه الباهرة وعددها عليهم ليعرفوه ويشكروه ويذكروه. This is from his greatest favors when he made his ibad, when he made the creation of the human beings, witness the ayat of Allah. That is, refers to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his signs that is above us and underneath us and his amazing favors, bahira, wa'addadaha, and he counted them. You find in the Quran, even in the surah, one verse, one sign after the other. لِيَعْرِفُوهُ, for the people to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَيَشْكُرُوهُ, and for them to be grateful to Allah, وَيَذْكُرُوهُ, and for them to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as you see in the same surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned from the ayah of the layl, الله الذي جعل لكم الليل لتسكنوا فيه والنهار مبصرا. الله الذي جعل الأرض قرارا. He's the one that made the earth for you قرار, a place of abode for you to be established. والذي خلقكم من تراب. He's the one that created you from dust, the one that made for you al-an'am. So all of that is for people to see the signs of Allah, to establish these things that is mentioned here. لِيَعْرِفُوا. So what's the ayah for? What's the sign for? What's the way of the Quran mentioning these ayat? To know Allah. To know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with his names and attributes. وَيَشْكُرُوا, and for people to be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And وَيَذْكُرُوا, and to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is all of that, the foundation of it is the tawheed of Allah. The oneness of worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is all these signs are for. So, and it's knowing وَيُرِيكُمْ آيَاتِهِ, he makes you see the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the idafa here, that it's attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what Allah created in the human beings. Right? So the human beings here, knowing these ayat and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in him, the way to think and the way to reflect that he would benefit from it, and to attribute these ayats to Allah, ayatihi. Right, so that the person then would see that with his own heart, with his own reason, that this is all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, a person would turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. That's why the ayah ends with a question here that has inkar in it, has tawbih in it, has scolding the human beings. How dare you not see the ayat of Allah or deny the ayat of Allah? Why do you deny some of it? فأي آيات الله تنكرون? What of the ayat of Allah that you would deny? أي آية من آيات لا تعترفون بها? That means which ayah of the ayat of Allah, the signs of Allah, you don't acknowledge. فإنكم قد تقرر عندكم أن جميع الآيات والنعم منه تعالى. It has been very established in you that all of the ayat, all of the signs and the favors are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. فلم يبقى للإنكار محل. There's no place for inkar, denying. ولا للإعراض عنها موضع. And there's no turning away, any place for turning away from it, because it surrounds you. It's all over the place. You can't turn away from the ayat of Allah. بل أوجبت لذوي الألباب, but rather these ayat أوجبت, by necessity made it an obligation upon those who have minds and reason, لذوي الألباب, intellect, بذل الجهد واستفراغ الوسع. They have to make the badl, they have to do the best they can, all of the effort and the struggle, واستفراغ الوسع, and to establish one's spaciousness and means to the best of their ability. للاجتهاد في طاعته, to struggle to be obedient to Allah, to use these signs of Allah to be as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us to be. And as you see, بذل الجهد أو الجهد, البذل is when you give without means of return. That means you give بذل of الجهد of your effort. واستفراغ الوسع, استفراغ الوسع is an expression. الوسع is the spaciousness, which gives the meaning of the ability. You have the spaciousness, that means you have the ability to. The matter is not tight for you. واستفراغ is when you pour something. So you fill all of the means that you have and the capacity you have to establish something. So for example, if someone, his power is to walk 10 steps, right? This is, if he walk 11 steps, he will collapse, right? So that means he need to walk 10 steps. Don't walk 2 steps when you have the ability to walk 10. This is istifragh al-wus'. right? So what is one's limits? And this is one of the favors of Allah. If someone knows their limits, oftentimes we are deceived thinking that this is our limits when we have more and more and we have more spaciousness in our limits. But it's because of the ignorance we do know ourselves very well, or because of the desires and all kinds of things, or someone because they get used to be lazy. Right? What happens? A person thinks that he's not able to when he has all the means and has the capacity, but he did not work on himself. And you can, many things in physical life can give that example. Muscles is like this, or something that you would see, for example, a band, elastic band, for example. When you see it, when it's not stretched, or you feel like this is all can it take. What it can take is that circle, that small circle. But when you stretch it, what's the stretch? What's the limit of that stretch that you can fit in it many things, but before it cuts, before it becomes weak, before it get torn. So to have that knowledge, and that's why people in physical matters they would have machines to measure these things, right? Even the napkins, for example, in the factories of these napkins, they measure the tension of these papers, what exactly what power that it would tear, so that they would manufacture not to make it very tight and very strong like a steel, and at the same time not to be very weak, right? What would make them give them the maximum need for what it's created for or what they manufacture it for. For example, to wipe something, and that's why there are different levels of it. And forgive me for going on and on with this, but this is what we, as human beings, we know these things. So when you have a paper towel, it's different than a tissue, is different than all these differences. And the human beings are very clever in knowing this, and they would maximize their profit with regards to these matters, and the price will be accordingly, and all of that is according to what is the job for it, what is it used for. And people would not use paper towel for bathroom cleaning themselves after the bathroom, vice versa. All of that to show again there is wus'a here, there is space, there is ability, there are limits. So physical matters, people know the limits for it. So more importantly than knowing the limits of glass and wood and steel and all of these things, to know the limits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us. And the hearts, the limits of it is unimaginable. The hearts, physically, we're limited, yes. And that's also, we need to know the limits. But when it comes to the hearts, and that's why the ayat of Allah requires for us to go as far as we can, to reflect upon the ayat of Allah. And that's why the hearts can reach the highest level of goodness, and to make this istifragh al-wusa', to reflect, to learn. And if a person never tried anything, he would never discover himself, never know his limits. So that's why there's a joy in this life. Part of the joy of this life is to check ourselves and what's the limits that we have. Even though the more we get older, it gets smaller. We need to know what our limits. So, and you take it in a gradual way. And that's why the miraculous way of this deen of Islam, even in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, أحب الأعمال إلى الله أدومها وإن قل. The most beloved deeds to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the ones that are done consistently, even if it's less. So this is one of the ways to know what's the maximum that you can reach. Start with something small. You might think, oh, I'm so excited, I'm going to pray for 5 hours. Don't start like this. You won't be able to do it physically and non-physically. But rather start with something small, 15 minutes, something like this on a daily basis. And you feel lazy, exert yourself, work on yourself. Fasting once a month, 1 day a month, 3 days a month, Mondays and Thursdays. Be consistent. And this is again optional acts of worship. Seeking knowledge. Right? Instead of when a person reads the stories of the Salaf, right, and amazing stories, but sometimes people, they give up on themselves thinking that these people, how can we be like them? So they don't even do anything. But rather, if a person gives 10 minutes a day for a week or 2 weeks, but consistently, then that opens up. This is now a person is able to discover himself. Maybe he has the means. Not everybody has it. But then they would increase and they would stretch the matter a little bit more. a little bit more, till what's the limit where if they do more, then it will take over other rights in their lives, or they will collapse. They won't be able to do it. So again, it's an amazing expression because it's something that is part of the deen, is to see the limits. واستفراغ الوسع. And since it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no excuse for someone to say I'm not able to do the obligations or to stay away from the haram because it's beyond my limits. This is a lie. Then you know for sure that this is a lie. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the obligations in the capacity according to the limits of the weakest of all of the human beings. That's why if someone is not able to pray standing, they would sit. That's part of the excuses that is valid in the deen. Someone is not able to fast the month of Ramadan, they have an excuse, then they don't have to fast, and so on. And the haram. And it's not a person would say, well, it's a necessity for me to deal with riba. That's my limits. I would suffer a great deal. No, you won't suffer. It's all whispers in your head. If it's haram, it's haram. You stay away. When it becomes beyond your capacity, if you're going to die at that moment. That's why eating pork, for example, eating haram to save one's life. So this is with ilm. So واستفراغ الوسع للاجتهاد, to make ijtihad and to do the best we can, especially the times that we live in, especially for those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them understand this religion, and they have the concern for the deen, and they see how things are. Then they should do the best they can. Really, that you should, with all of the rights in our life, and not just the obligations, but also the optional acts of worship, the matters of knowledge. If a person has the means to seek knowledge, for example, then he should not waste his life, but rather seek knowledge in whatever occupations that a person has, to do the best he can, and so on. والتبتل في خدمته. التبتل, as we talked about it before, is الانقطاع. When someone has nothing else but this, to give all of the time while he's doing it. So while you are in salah, you are having tabattul. When you are in salah, you're not doing anything else. You're not making your plans for the day because you are in salah. So you're having tabattul, munqati'. You severed yourself from everything else except the salah. If you are in a session of tafsir, you're making tabattul, even though it's online, right? But you're not cooking, for example, you're not fixing something. You're focused so that you would have the tabattul in whatever you are upon or experiencing. The same thing when it comes to if you're at work. If you're a surgeon, right, it's required from you that you are, while you're doing the surgery, you're having tabattul while you're doing it. You're not busy with anything else. The same thing if you're in any job, whatever a person is doing, there is this tabattul fi khidmati, in the service of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, walinqita' ilayhi, in whatever ibadah a person, then this is the means of provisions. When a person yatafarragh, empty himself when it comes to the time of the ibadah and the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also the fitan that we're in, that we become so much connected that a person is not able to cut himself off or away from all of these distractions by Iblis. So we have to have the ability to do so, right? As if that is, when we say Allahu Akbar in the salah, wal'adhu billah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us, it seems like this is the only time that a person is not getting his phone and looking at it. What happens if this is now start to be, or a fatwa comes that it's okay to check your phone while you're in salah, for example, right? That time to many of us where the phones are not something that we're occupied in unless we are in salah, for example, right? So the ability, the power of being able to make tabattul in whatever actions that we are in, this is also one of the favors of Allah. All of this, and forgive me for talking too much, but it's all of the signs, or the outcome of benefiting from the signs of Allah. وَيُرِيكُمْ آيَاتِهِ فَأَيَّ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ تُنْكِرُونَ. Which are the signs of Allah are you denying? Therefore, we acknowledge all of the signs of Allah, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us benefit from it, and to forgive us for the forgetfulness and for the turning away from benefiting from the signs of Allah, that would make us, as this last line that we just read, that give us the ability to make the ijtihad and to put the effort in reaching the highest level of goodness, each according to the limits and their capacity. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. And the attendance code is الفلك تحملون. And as you know, that the attendance code is not necessarily a complete sentence, so it's just الفلك تحملون, two separate words, inshallah. Is it okay for someone who's caring for their elderly parents to talk about what they do for them all the time, even if it might come across as complaining or venting about how overwhelming it can be? How should one deal with it? Wallahi, when it comes to the good deeds, we have to be extremely careful not to ruin it or to lose the rewards. And there are levels in this. So it depends on how and the way that a person is doing that. A person, if he is, for example, showing his minna, his favors upon others, that ruins the deed, that ruins the good deed. As the sadaqah, قول معروف ومغفرة خير من صدقة يتبعها أذى. So it's when it comes to the sadaqah. Those who have يتبعون ما أنفقوا منا, they follow their whenever they spend, and the spending doesn't have to be only money, spending from their effort and their time. They would follow that with men. Men is to make people remember and know his favors upon others. So that should be avoided unless there's a maslaha or a benefit in this. Encouraging others, for example, and a person, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's in the heart. Or people, for example, might say, for example, if the husband is taking care of his parents, so the wife is complaining, why you're not giving us much time and things like this. So he would say, I'm taking care of my mother, she's old and this and that, as a way to defend himself or to not to make things bad between him and his wife. So that's okay, for example. So if there's a benefit of saying it, sure, there's no problem. But to say it in a way that a person is complaining, for example, that means this is a bad sign. That means maybe he's not getting rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or again, if he says it's overwhelming, that means don't put more burden on me. Maybe this can be okay, but a person has to be at ease with oneself and to be careful so that a person doesn't lose the rewards, and rather look at it from the perspective that this is a favor of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestows his favor upon people in a different ways. When you open the way for a person to be in the service of others, this is a great favor from Allah. When people are in need of you, this is such a great favor from Allah for the one that is working for them, not for those who are benefiting from him. That's why the Sahaba, they used to like the one that comes and asks them for a favor more than the one that is the favor is bestowed upon them, because now he finds a way to use the favor of Allah to be used in the right way. He finds a place for his money to be spent on. He finds his effort to be used and his energy and his power to be used in the right way instead of wasting it. And to add to this also the ayah of الذين يبخلون ويأمرون الناس بالبخل. Those who are greedy, stingy, and they command people to be greedy and stingy. Al-bukhl here, as some of the ulama in the tafsir, or greediness, they said that it's not just by wealth, it's not just stinginess with wealth, but it's all the things that can be benefiting to others, whether it's helping others, knowledge. One of the intentions of seeking knowledge so that we benefit others. So, and this is all comes with the stinginess, that ability to help someone that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed that he becomes part of your life, that you need to help them, like parents and things like this. The one that should be happy is the one that is helping, and to be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this is a way of worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as they say, لعن الله قاطع المعروف, that Allah curses the one that severs or stops the ma'ruf or the goodness. And some of these things can also affect others in a negative way. People then would think that, helping others is a very difficult thing, I won't do it. Because when they hear their parents, for example, or they're always complaining of these types of things, so why should I be then in that path as they are? But rather, a person should spread what's positive and what's gratefulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I hope it's clear, inshallah. طيب, barakallah fikum. Inshallah ta'ala, tonight we have a dars, inshallah. And till we start, till the end of the month, inshallah ta'ala, completing some of the books that we had already started. And we'll read some of the hadith from Sunan ad-Darimi, inshallah, because we had already started that long time ago, inshallah. Barakallah fikum. So that's after Maghrib, inshallah. طيب جزاكم الله خيرا وبارك الله فيكم. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless our gatherings and make us among the people of the Quran. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.